Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. We're presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer of the frontofficenews.com, Cincinnati Rivals, and me with Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Check out Cincinnati Bearcats on SI.com. We're presented by Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Season is here, everybody. We are less than 8 days away as of this recording from week 1 of college football. Florida State, Georgia Tech, I'm pretty sure, getting rolling in week 0. So it's here, people. Gridiron glory, gridiron action, ready to roll. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. And when the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE and get in on the action. BLEAV is that promo code, once again spelled out. Bet Online. The game starts here. Welcome, Neil Meyer, in just a moment. Give you a preview of what we have in today's show before we take a quick break and thank our sponsors. Brendan Sorsby, the reporting becomes official gospel from Scott Satterfield on Thursday afternoon. He is Cincinnati's quarterback of choice. We'll dive into that official announcement. The latest on Dante Corleone. Give the thoughts from Neil and I, who saw him out there at 2 practices this week. Offensive line dealing with some injuries right now. Give the latest there before we take a break and give our first 6-game prediction rundown. Our first half schedule picks. Neil will give his picks. I will give mine for the first 6 games of the season before we send you off into the weekend here on Bearcat Blitz. We're presented by Bet Online. Stick with us through this break. Welcome on Neil Meyer after these messages. Neil, it is official. Brendan Sorsby is the starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Scott Satterfield making that announcement on Thursday officially as Sorsby's reigns. He took them by the horns and just absolutely controlled this job, Neil. Not necessarily from start to finish, but did enough to get the nod over Brady Lichtenberg, a guy who I think you and I would both agree has improved his throwing acumen, his accuracy very much so over the past year, but it was not enough to overcome kind of the raw physical abilities of Brendan Sorsby. And now the floor is his for him to take control and become the next starting quarterback at Cincinnati, a tenure that could last multiple seasons if he plays well enough to hold on to the job going into next year and maybe beyond.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And I think this comes to many as not a surprise. But I will say throughout the span of the 2.5 weeks of fall camp, it was truly a quarterback battle. And Brendan Sorsby took the reins and took control, and he never looked back. And I think, Russ, as you mentioned, this is a guy who comes in from Indiana, and Scott Satterfield even alluded to it, that having that experience at the Power 5 level played to his advantage a little bit more. Obviously, he had the 7 starts at Indiana last season. And, I mean, Russ, 2 of his better games in his redshirt freshman season last year came against Penn State and Illinois, both games on the road. So, overall, he has that experience there at the Power 5 level. But, overall, Russ, this is a guy who came into Cincinnati, a guy who brings the dual threat option, and a guy with a big arm strength. And Russ, you and I have both saw that throughout fall camp as well. So overall, Brendan Sorsby is your starting quarterback for Cincinnati, but it's going to be exciting to see what he kind of can do for this Cincinnati offense. Obviously, Scott Satterfield mentioned he has the dynamic to really shift things up there in the quarterback run game, but also he has the arm strength to really open things up in the passing game as well. So it's going to be interesting to see, can that arm strength really allow Cincinnati to get across the middle of the field there and take some shots and hit those big explosive plays? Because, Russ, you and I both know from watching this program and covering this program last year, Cincinnati could not get the throw game really going at all at any point last season. And now Brendan Sorsby comes in, and the biggest thing that we have heard about Brendan Sorsby throughout fall camp is his leadership abilities. And Gavin Gerhardt spoke highly of him yesterday, saying right when Brendan Sorsby came to campus, he made it known to go around and introduce himself to just about every player and really start to build that relationship and that bond with each and every one of these teammates and show, hey, I'm here for the right reasons. I'm here to be that guy. And after a strong fall camp, he went out and he really performed really well. I thought he had probably the best few drives of this opening scrimmage, Russ, where, first 2 drives, you go touchdown, 60-yard touchdown to Joe Royer. You catch Joe Royer across the middle of the field for another 40-yard bomb and then a 30-yard touchdown just 2 plays later from Royer. So that connection looked really well as for Sorsby. It's great to see the tight ends getting involved, but it's going to be exciting to see how he really handles it. Obviously, too, handles the pressure that comes within the Big 12. But Russ, as another thing you mentioned, this could be something that is substantial for Cincinnati, obviously due to the fact that Brendan Sorsby has 3 years of eligibility. If he has a strong showing this season, this could be a job that he could hold on to for the next 2-3 seasons, and it could get interesting. And overall, with the stature and the frame and his dynamic athletic and playmaking abilities, it's going to be interesting, Russ, heading forward to see what kind of caliber of performance that Brendan Sorsby will be able to put out on the field. So overall, Brendan Sorsby's named that team starter for next week's home opener versus Towson. So really excited to see what he's able to do there in his first showing at Nippert Stadium.
The deep ball. Can he be consistent with that deep ball, and can he be consistent over the middle of the field? If he can, Neil, this team will be bowling in 2024. Yep. They will make a bowl game, especially with us. Especially going to the next segment, we're assuming that they will have Dante Corleone at some point this season, hopefully before the end of the non-conference schedule. So that's kind of just we're making all these assumptions with Dante Corleone being in the fold. If he's not in the fold, we're going to have a different discussion. But if he is in the fold, especially before non-conference schedule, then this is what we're kind of prefacing everything with. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago, but he was way better on deep passes last year, even with the struggles inconsistencies in his first year as a starter compared to Emory Jones. 79.6 PFF grade on 39 passes of 20-plus yards last season. Emory Jones, 61.8 PFF grade on 48 attempts of 20-plus yards last season. It's a big, big difference right there. And 2 or 3 more big plays, Neil, in how many projected tight games this team is going to be playing in. Kelly Ford ratings came out yesterday. People can look that up on Twitter and see how many projected 1-score games Cincinnati is going to be involved in. They're in the top half of the country in terms of 7 projected 1-score games on their schedule, according to Kelly Ford's rating. So with those kinds of matchups, it's so important to just get a big home run hitter every now and then. Get a big home run shot to land every now and then to give yourself a little bit more room for a little bit more margin for error, so to speak, in those contests that are going to be pretty tight. And when you look at the schedule, Neil, outside of the Towson game, every game there on after, outside of maybe KSU, where I'd expect them to be a decent underdog unless they're absolutely lighting the world on fire by that point in the schedule, it's going to be betting spreads of UC favored by 3 to 7 points or UC an underdog by 3 to 7 points in my eyes for the majority of the season. So if you can get those extra big plays sprinkled in here and there that you didn't have last season because of the arm of talent of Brendan Sorsby, that could be the difference in going bowling right there. Speaking of Dante Corleone, let's get to him now, Neil, and comments from Scott Satterfield kind of at the end of his presser about, this was a great question from Scott Springer of the Inquirer. He asked, do you expect to see Dante Corleone out there with the captain suited up in full uniform at the 50-yard line in any of these games over the next month? Scott Satterfield, in the deft coaching response that he has, didn't really give a definitive answer, Neil, but they are hopeful. He's done a few more things this week. We saw him in 7-on-7s on Tuesday, getting multiple reps in the 7-on-7 session. I didn't see him out there in 7-on-7s Thursday, although it was a less heavy defensive and offensive day. It was a more of a special teams day on Thursday with them working on some onside kick stuff and all that jazz. So we didn't see as much kind of impactful work from Dante on Thursday. It's just all part of the plan, though, and they are slowly working him back. We'll see if he's out there for Towson. At this point, Neil, unless he's practicing on Tuesday when we go out there and watch, if he's not there, I would be shocked to see him play without a full week of practice. So I would be shocked to see him play in the Towson game if he's not out there on Tuesday as a full participant. But the Pitt game, the Miami game, and then the Houston game all over the next month or so, sometime in that window, I imagine, is when this coaching staff is hoping to get Dante Corleone back. It's just all about how that body responds to treatment with a condition, these blood clots that you and I talked about on the sideline a couple of days ago. It's just so fickle. It's such a case-by-case basis, and that's why you have to be very, very careful and cautious bringing someone back from this type of condition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's also worth noting, too, about Scott Satterfield's comments, Russ, that he even said it himself that Dante Corleone is doing a lot of extra work on the side, and he's coming off just as sweaty, if not even sweatier than some of the guys who are going through practice.
Yeah, it's not like it's really just a matter of contact right now, Neil.
Yeah.
He's getting all the cardio in. We're seeing him work his tail off out there on the field. It's just about that contact, I would imagine. And it's unfortunate that it's a contact area with his lungs and where the blood clots were. That, I mean, Neil, he's going to be getting hit there almost every single play. It's the chest. Like that's where the war happens in the trenches.
Yeah. So that's the number one thing, is that he has been able to do a lot of individual work, but we've also seen him kind of progress a little bit there as this week has gone on. But overall, it's going to be a crucial standpoint, especially come on Tuesday. If we see him out there on Tuesday in the open media portion of practice or whatnot, we'll kind of have a more definitive answer there on his status heading into Towson. But overall, it's kind of ramping up, Russ, to where we will potentially see him out there on the field. Not 100%, but it's just all coming down to what the medical staff does. Because obviously, with something with how blood clots are, no case is the same. So everything is different with each individual, and every person's body is different as well. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be something to keep an eye on. But Dante Corleone is fighting hard to get back out on the field and be out there with his guys. And Russ, obviously, heading into the predictions, we're making this prediction with Dante out there. So overall, if Dante's out there, everybody knows the kind of player he is and what this caliber of defense now shifts to. But it's all going to be kind of weary if he is able to go, especially there throughout the non-conference slate, whether that's Towson, Pitt, or Miami. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see, because it's kind of worth noting too, Russ, that the Big 12, I mean, you're playing a Power 5 conference schedule where you're going to see probably 5 to 6 teams maybe ranked in the top 30, top 35 throughout the season. And
no, they're not. What are you talking about? They're not going to see 6 top 30 teams. I would be shocked.
Top 35. Well, right now, average number of power conferences per Brett Murphy, average number of power conferences opponents each league team will play this season. So average number. So that's whether that's top 35, top 40, top 50, 60, whatever that might be. The Big 12 leads all conferences sitting at 10.25. So that's the gauntlet of the Big 12. So overall, these predictions, this conference is so all over the place right now. Every game is going to be a battle, as you mentioned, with the 3 to 7 point spread as well. So it's going to be interesting, but having Dante Corleone out on the field would be definitely the right step in the right direction for Cincinnati as well.
Yeah, I don't want to be hearing anything about a gauntlet with this Bearcat schedule. This is not a gauntlet.
This Bearcat schedule, they should be bowling. It's easy to say they should be bowling at the end of the season. I mean, this schedule is played out into their favor, Russ. I mean, we can go ahead and get right into it. I mean, it's pretty easy that their first 4 games, there's a chance they could be 4-0. There's a chance they could be 3-1, 2-2. You never know.
Yeah, we'll wait a second on the scheduling just because we got to get to the offensive line and then get a quick break. Mm-hmm. But just to tie a bow on that, Neil, this is no gauntlet. It's the 7th easiest schedule in the conference, 60th toughest schedule in the entire country, according to ESPN FPI. Any way you shape it, that boils down to basically one of the 15 to 20 easiest schedules for any power conference team in the country. They play one preseason ranked AP top 25 team on the entire schedule, and that's at Kansas State, and that's the game that I mentioned being the biggest bugaboo. When you look outside of that, it's the Iowa State and Kansas State back-to-back road trip. That is the most daunting portion of the schedule by far, and it's those final 3 games that are going to be the toughest. Iowa State, Kansas State, TCU, a lot of chances to make hay make noise, and set yourself up for a bowl opportunity. Get to 6 wins even before that stretch. And even if you go 0-3 there, you can still get into a bowl game. I think that's a possibility. They could be at 6 wins before that point. But before we get to the schedule predictions here, Neil, offensive line a little banged up. Sounds like I gave him the classic announcer's jinx on Tuesday when I said they were coming into the season ready to fire. DeAndre Buford not practiced this week. Scott Satterfield's confident he'll be back out there on Sunday for the first practice of game week. And then Philip Wilder also has not been out there. Was out there earlier in the week, did not practice on Thursday when we saw him. So his status a little bit more murky and doubt for the game against Towson. Didn't sound like serious issues for either guy, though, Neil. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, no, that is great to hear. Obviously, considering how much depth that they have there at the offensive line, obviously, Philip Wilder has had a tremendous camp, Russ. And, I mean, he's been a guy who's really stood out there on the offensive line and really has solidified his spot there within one of those guys who can come in and you can throw him at, whether that's the guard, the tackle position, whichever. His versatility plays a role to where you can put him at multiple different positions. So it sounds like it's nothing too serious there with either of them. But overall, the offensive line is a little dinged up right now, to say the least. But Scott Satterfield is comfortable. He did note when asked about the injuries that they do feel like they'll have about 7 or 8 to healthy offensive linemen available for Towson as well that could see significant snaps. And that's been something he's mentioned all offseason. It's the depth at that offensive line position. So that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Taking a quick break here on Bearcat Blitz. First half predictions after this. Here we go, Neil. Let's go game by game. We could start with Towson. In the first 6 contests of the season, Neil Meyer and I are about to give our predictions for Cincinnati and how they will fare in each of these. Neil, we don't have to spend much time. We don't need to waste much of it on Towson. I got 56-17 win for the Bearcats. Tigers were under 500 as an FCS team last year. That's about all you need to know. That's all the people need to know. Coming in the Nippert Stadium, this should be an absolute drubbing.
Yeah, I'm going to go 49-17. As you mentioned, it's going to be a high-scoring game in terms of Cincinnati. FCS team coming in there. I just don't think it's going to be one of those EKU games where they're capable of putting up 66 points in their opener, but you never know what could happen. But overall, this should be an easy win for the Bearcats there in week 1.
Pitt, I got the Bearcats with Dante Corleone winning 27-26. Without Dante Corleone, just flip that score. I think the Pitt Panthers get the job done and are able to run their way to glory and victory on the road. It's going to come down to that for me in a lot of these games. And I'm predicting this with Dante Corleone. So we're going to go with the Bearcats 27-26 over a Pitt team that has yet to figure out their quarterback situation so far this year. They are kind of right in the mid-tier aspect of things with Cincinnati. When you think about Cincinnati being at roughly 65 to 75 range on the national analytics gauges over all across the country, and Pitt checking in at about 50-ish range to 65 range when you factor in them having to go on the road. This is a toss-up game for me, Neil, and I think the home team gets it done with Dante Corleone, and they lose if they don't have him.
No, I'm right there with you. I think this is a game where if they have Dante Corleone, this will be a 31-24 victory in favor of Cincinnati, just because of what Dante Corleone was able to do versus Pitt last year. He had so much success up front in the trenches. But if he is not able to go, this could be a game where it could be a toss-up, as you mentioned, to where that score could be flipped in favor of Pitt. Obviously, they have a lot to figure out there at the quarterback position. But overall, it's going to be really honed in on that defensive line for that matchup as well. So this is one of those marquee matchups where it could go 50-50. But I'm going to stick with the favor in this one in favor of the Bearcats.
Yes, Cincinnati, as of right now, I believe they are, I think, like a 53% favorite or something like that to win that game against Pitt. Pull it up right here. They are looking at, roughly, or Pitt, is a 52.8% matchup favorite. And I would imagine Cincinnati will either be a 1.5 to 2 point underdog or a 1.5 to 2 point favorite going into that one. Moving along to the battle for the victory bell. Cincinnati trying to get this one back in town. They go on the road to Miami for the last time in a long time. It's going to be a while, if ever, that Cincinnati goes back to Yager Stadium following this matchup. And I think they get the job done, Neil, with Dante Corleone, 20-17 for the Bearcats. I think they lose this game if they don't have Dante Corleone. Flip it the other way. I see this being a knockdown, drag out defensive fight, and I think the Bearcats they're gonna rely on Dante Corleone's health for the result of this game. I think Carter Brown and Mason Fletcher do their best jobs to kind of control the field position on the punting side of things and hit some long field goals on the kicking side of things for Carter Brown, and Cincinnati ends up pulling this one out. But I think people are probably taking Miami a little lightly, thinking about UC having a stronger mindset going into this game. This is not going to be easy, Neil. Miami is one of the best mid-tier, best group of 5 teams in the country. They could easily go and run the table this year if they and make the college football playoff. And they are only 46.4% underdog in ESPN's Football Power Index in this game. And they're not going to run the table, excuse me. They're going to lose at Notre Dame on September 21st. But 11 wins, 10 wins for this Miami team, not even close to out of the question coming off a MAC title.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a game where a lot of people could kind of see Cincinnati coming back with the vengeance there and retaining the victory belt. But it's worth noting that Miami is returning just about everything there on the offensive side of the ball, especially up front on the offensive line. But Russ, it's also worth noting, years past, this is a game that's known to get a little hairy, a little wonky, that you never know what could happen in this game. And we saw it firsthand last season. So with Dante Corleone, I'm expecting this to be a 27-24 victory for Cincinnati. But without Dante Corleone, it could be a lot closer of a game. It could be a low scoring game.
Can't be closer than 27-24.
Yeah, can't be much closer than 27-24, but I'm going to go with 27-24 in favor of Cincinnati there.
Yeah, it's a linchpin game. Those 2 of the first 3 are linchpin games with Dante Corleone for me, especially when the reason I say that is Neil and I have seen what the replacements are for Jalen Hunt and Dante Corleone. They are adequate players with speed, but players that do not have the size to last as a nose tackle in the Big 12, especially just where they are right now. You can't expect to hold your own across a full slate of snaps if you're tipping the scales at less than 300 to 310 pounds as a nose tackle in this sport at this level. And that's just what they don't have. They've lost their 2 options as of right now for that spot. They need that one in Dante Corleone to come back because they're not getting Jalen Hunt back into the fold. Moving along, Neil and I, with Dante Corleone, 3-0 start. Without Dante Corleone, Neil has them going 2-1. I had them at 1-2, and then we moved to Houston. I think this is a win with or without Dante. Give me the Bearcats 36-23. I think Houston is arguably the worst team in the Big 12. They are going to have a brutal time going up against this offensive line. One of the worst teams in the country last year against the run, 168.6 yards per game allowed. I see that continuing here in another transition year for Houston. 36-23 Bearcats and 36-30 Bearcats if they don't have Dante Corleone.
Yeah, and Russ, it's worth noting that Houston was projected to finish at the bottom of the Big 12 preseason media polls. So it's also worth noting, too, when you put that into consideration, that this could be a potential start where the Bearcats could go 3-1, 4-0, 2-2. You don't 100% know, but I have them taking this victory here over Houston. I'm going to keep it a 31-17 game. That's with Dante Corleone or without Dante Corleone. Obviously, there's a lot of things that arise there with Houston due to their quarterback play. Donovan Smith's coming off a labrum injury that required surgery following the season. It's going to be interesting to see how he comes back there as well. So with that being noted, it's going to be interesting to see what might happen there for that Houston game. But I have the Bearcats 31-17.
Awesome. I think we're back. I think I dropped out there a little bit. My computer died, but we're good. We should be back.
Yep. Now let's turn the focus there, Russ, for the Week 5 matchup versus Texas Tech. They're on the road in Lubbock for me personally, this could be a game where it could go either way. Lubbock is not an easy place to play. Everybody knows that. And Jody McGuire has done a fantastic job with that program down there in Lubbock and Texas Tech. So it's going to be really interesting to see, but there's a good chance where this could be a 3-1, 4-0 Cincinnati team heading into Texas Tech. But unfortunately, I think this is where the first Big 12 conference loss will come into play. They're on the road. I will take Texas Tech 31-27 for Cincinnati.
Yeah, Neil, you talked about them playing a lot of top 30 to 35 teams. I think this is a team in the Red Raiders that could be one of those top 30 to 35 teams, and I would be shocked if they're not in the top 40 across both sides of the ball. Very well balanced. I think this sobers up. A 4-0 start with Dante Corleone and a 2-2 start without Dante Corleone. They fall in this game. But overall, if things go to plan, knock on wood, they have Dante Corleone. Still a 4-1 start for me in the first 5 games, and Cincinnati falls in this one 33-24 at Texas Tech. Moving along to UCF, I got the Knights narrowly winning this one to put a bit of a sour taste in the mouth of fans going into the midway point of the season. 36-35 win for UCF. I just kind of think at home it's going to be the difference. That crowd at home will be the difference just enough to give them the win here and ultimately send Cincinnati back home at 4-2 midway through the 2024 season.
Yeah, Russ, I'm going to be right there with you and say this is probably going to be a game where it's going to be 38-35 in favor of UCF. But the reason being is that some of these guys on this Cincinnati roster who are still here from the 2022 season, they got a great look at what KJ Jefferson was able to do there when they played in Arkansas. I mean, KJ Jefferson, guys, when they played at Arkansas in 2022, looking up at the stats now, finished 18 for 26 for 223 yards and 3 touchdowns on the day through the air. But he also finished with 18 carries for 87 yards for a total of 62 yards after a loss of 25. And he had a touchdown there, so he acquired for 4 touchdowns there. KJ Jefferson, I mean, everybody knows the kind of player he is. He is not built like a quarterback. He is built like a linebacker. And after seeing him and talking to him firsthand in person in Las Vegas, I mean, he is every bit of 240 that he is listed, 245. But it's going to be interesting to see what does UCF's defense look like. Could guys like Deshaun Pace, Brian Threats, Miles Montgomery play big roles in that? And if so, do they let the emotions get the best of them in this rivalry matchup? Or do they stay level-headed and really lock in and help excel there on the defensive end? But this is a game that could go either way. But the Bounce House is known to be the Bounce House. I've been there personally. I've covered a game at the Bounce House. There's a reason they call it the Bounce House. I will say that press box does shake because of how loud that stadium gets. But it's going to be definitely going to be a toss-up game. UCF really went out and hit the portal as well. So they brought in the key pieces they needed there on the defensive end and at the quarterback position with John Riles Plumlee taking his next step in his playing journey. But it's going to be interesting to see if Cincinnati can really find ways to exploit that defense and really try and put some points up on the board there. So, but me personally, Russ, I got it a 38-35 game in favor of UCF.
4-2. I have the Bearcats going in the first half of the season, as does Neil. And obviously those things change a little bit if Cincinnati does not ultimately get Dante Corleone back across that first half. Knock on wood. Keep knocking, people, that they can get him on the field as soon as possible, health permitting. For Neil Meyer, I am Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
6, Ritter to the end zone, looking for Pierce. Did he hang on? Yes. Touchdown. Back as I've been around. Here he goes again. Busts free. Jerome Ford down the sideline.